Hey guys! In today's video, I'll be showing you the basics of the Addi knitting machine, and also part 1 of making a beanie just like this one. So if you like crafting, knitting, or crochet tutorials and creations, make sure to hit that subscribe button to see more videos like this and super fun shorts. So this is the Addi Express King size, and it comes with 46 needles. You can make hats, scarves, and a lot of other fun crafting projects as well. The parts of the machine include the row counter, the needles, the crank, and the knob that switches between circular knitting and plain knitting. Also, you can see the table clamps or feet that attach the Addi to the table, and the installation for these is very easy. Next, we have this double-sided Addi hook tool, and it's great when it comes to troubleshooting drop stitches. And lastly, the plastic darning needle. Now mine is a little janky, but that's okay, and it sits right here in the machine, which I think is pretty cute. The last thing we need to cover before we get started is the different types of yarn the machine can take. The recommended yarn size for the Addi Express is 4 to 8 millimeters, or DK to super chunky. 2 of my favorite yarn brands are I Love This Yarn Acrylic, which is a size 4, and Yarn Bee's Soft and Sleek, which is also a size 4 medium. I love both of these brands, but tell me in the comments what your favorite brand of yarn is. Today we're making a beanie, so we'll be using the circular knitting function. Make sure your knob is set correctly, and I'll show you the ins and outs of the machine. First, let's start by resetting our row counter to 0. Next, we take our working yarn and put a long tail in the middle of the machine. Now we crank the handle until we arrive at the first black needle. Just like this. As we cast on the yarn, we start by weaving the yarn underneath the first black needle, making sure it's caught when we crank the handle. After that, weave the yarn over the next needle, and continue weaving over and under all the needles until you reach the first black needle again. Take your time on this row. It's the most important one. Also, don't grip your yarn too hard, or the row will become too tight. To end the first row, your yarn should be over the last needle. Open the yarn holder, put the yarn in, close it, and you are successfully cast on. Now you can crank freely. For this hat, I'm going to do 10 rows of this purple, and then I'll show you how to change to another color. Though you can't see it off screen, I'm holding the yarn with a steady tension. So this leads to all the stitches and rows looking as even as possible in the finished product. This skill does take some practice, and everyone does it a bit differently. Also, while you're working, constantly be looking for drop stitches or any other issues with the yarn. Now that we've reached the last row of this color, I'm going to go slower to make sure I don't mess up this row in any way. We're back at the first black needle, and I did 10 rows of the color purple. I'm going to cut a long tail of the first color, open the yarn holder, and let the yarn fall in the middle of the machine. Then, take your second color and put it in the same space between the needles. Secure it in the yarn holder and close it. Grab both ends of the yarn and hold firmly as you turn the crank, making sure the first and the second colors catch. Both of these tails will be left open for a while. They won't come undone, and after a few rows, I'll show you how to tie them together. I do about 10 rows and then tie them. Some people wait to tie them, and that works too. This is just the way that works best for me. Let me zoom in to give you a better look. I tie a knot, making sure it's secure but not too tight. Then I tie one more knot. Now both ends are connected and you can keep knitting. Let me show you how to change colors one more time. Cut a long piece of the working yarn and put that tail in the middle of the machine. Place the second color in the yarn holder and put its tail in the same space between needles. Holding both tails, turn the handle slowly, making sure both colors catch, and you can continue knitting as normal. Now, let me take a second to talk about hat sizes. For a kid's hat, I usually knit around 90 to 100 rows. And for an adult's hat, I usually knit around 120 rows. This will depend on the style of hat you want to make. If you want a beanie that has a closer fit, knit less rows. And if you want a beanie that has more of a slouch, knit more. Now that I've reached my desired length, let's cast off. I'm going to cut a long tail, which for me is about 1.5 feet, just so I have room for air. The casting off process looks a lot like a color change because you put the yarn tail in the middle of the machine and hold it as you slowly crank the handle. Grab your darning needle and thread on your yarn tail. And I'm not going to be starting in the space where my yarn tail comes from, but in the next space down. Use your needle to pick up the thread between the two red pegs and pull your yarn through. Just a tip, put your finger over the next space so the yarn there doesn't pop off, especially in the beginning, because that can happen. Come around and repeat the process again. Use the needle to pick up the yarn and pull it through. And now you're casting off. Here's the process, but sped up just a little bit. At the beginning, I highly recommend casting off one space at a time, but as more of your hat comes off the machine and it becomes looser, you can pick up 3 to 4 spaces on your needle at a time. But just a warning, this does heighten the possibility of something going wrong, so do whatever you feel the most comfortable with. Continue picking up the yarn all the way around until you reach the last stitch. And there you go, you have successfully cast off the Addi knitting machine. You can see that all the stitches and rows came out even, and the color changes here have a really good tension with no bulges. It really turned out well. I love this machine, and if you love knitting or crafting, I highly recommend looking into it. So here's my honest review of the Addi knitting machine. So first of all, we have the pros. Speed. Compared to hand knitting, the Addi King Size drastically reduces the time needed to complete projects. Accessibility. This machine is perfect for beginners and those with hand or wrist issues. And I would know, I knew nothing about knitting before picking up this machine, and I was able to learn it in a reasonable amount of time. Lastly, it's very fun to use. I really like getting it out, and if I want to unwind myself, I will find myself making a few hats. But there are some cons. There is limited control. You can only use specific yarn types, and if you use yarns outside of that range, it can cause jams or skipped stitches. Second, there is a learning curve. While it is simple to operate, mastering tension and troubleshooting issues like drop stitches are gonna take some time. Cost. As a premium knitting machine, it's on the pricier side compared to alternatives, which might be a barrier for some casual crafters. So that was my honest review of the Addi King Size knitting machine. In my next video, I'll take this tube and finish making my beanie, which you can see here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or issues with your own Addi, leave a comment below and I'll be sure to reply. Lastly, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you liked the video and learned something new. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!